The unsung note. The weathered piano in the corner of the community center had seen better days. Its ivory keys were yellowed with age, and several notes stuck when pressed too firmly. But to Cassandra Winters, it was the only available vessel for the melodies that had lived in her head for years. "You'll do great," encouraged Dina, the fundraiser organizer and Cassandra's oldest friend. "Nobody expects perfection at a neighborhood benefit." Cassandra nodded, though her stomach twisted with each passing minute. At 34, she'd spent her life hiding behind the shelves of Winterleaf Books, the small independent bookstore she'd inherited from her grandmother. Her customers knew her as the quiet woman who could recommend the perfect novel for any mood, but knew nothing of the compositions she scribbled in notebooks after closing time. "Next up, we have a special treat," announced Dina to the crowd of local donors and community members. "Our very own Cassandra Winters will perform an original piano composition." The polite applause that followed felt like a sentence. Cassandra walked to the piano, her emerald dress, borrowed from Dina and slightly too large, catching on a chair as she passed. The small stumble elicited a few chuckles from the front row. She sat at the bench, positioned her trembling fingers over the keys, and began to play the piece she'd titled Autumn Whispers. The first few measures flowed beautifully, her nervousness momentarily forgotten as the music transported her. Then came the difficult bridge section. Her fingers faltered, hitting a dissonant chord. She paused, tried again. "Another mistake. Is this supposed to be music or a cat walking on the keys?" Someone whispered loudly enough for nearby tables to hear. Laughter rippled through the room. Cassandra's fingers froze completely. Her vision blurred with tears as she stared at the traitorous keys. Someone began a slow clap that felt more like mockery than encouragement. "I'm sorry," she whispered, though no one could hear her. She stood abruptly, nearly toppling the bench, and hurried toward the exit, the sound of conversation and laughter swelling behind her. In the hallway, she leaned against the wall, eyes closed, willing her racing heart to calm. The door opened and closed quietly. "You left before." "The best part," came a low voice. Cassandra's eyes snapped open to see a tall man with salt and pepper hair and intense gray eyes studying her with unexpected interest. "Excuse me?" "Your composition." The melodic structure suggested something remarkable was coming after that bridge. His voice carried no judgment, only curiosity. "It doesn't matter now." She brushed away a tear. "I clearly don't belong on stage. Stage fright and musical talent are not mutually exclusive." He extended his hand. "Julian Porter," the name registered dimly. Julian Porter, the reclusive producer behind some of the most innovative albums of the past decade, who'd vanished from the industry 3 years ago. "Cassandra Winters," she replied automatically, taking his hand. "The piece you were playing, it's yours?" She nodded, wary of another critique. "I've heard thousands of compositions, Ms. Winters. Most are forgettable. Yours isn't." He reached into his jacket and retrieved a business card. "I have a small recording studio outside the city. If you're interested in finishing what you started tonight without an audience, I'd like to hear it." "Why would you want to hear more after that?" A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "Because in 30 years of music production, I've learned that what happens after someone falters tells me more about their potential than a flawless performance ever could." The door opened again as Dina peeked out. "Cass, are you okay? We can—" She stopped, recognizing Julian. "Oh, Mr. Porter, I had no idea you were attending tonight." "Just observing," he replied, then turned back to Cassandra. "The offer stands. Think about it." As he walked away, Cassandra clutched the business card, wondering if humiliation could somehow lead to something other than regret. For the first time in years, the melodies in her head weren't drowned out by her own doubts. Harmonies in shadow 3 days passed before Cassandra found herself driving along a winding coastal road, following GPS directions to Julian Porter's studio. The business card had sat on her nightstand, both temptation and torment. Each time she resolved to throw it away, she'd hear the phantom melodies in her head grow louder, more insistent. Ridgecrest Studio was nothing like she'd imagined. No sleek modern building with imposing security, but a converted lighthouse perched on a rocky outcropping, its white paint weathered by salt air. As she parked her aging Honda beside Julian's modest sedan, Cassandra wondered if she'd made a terrible mistake. Julian met her at the door, dressed in faded jeans and a simple blue Henley that made him look more like a sailor than a legendary producer. "You came," he said, genuine surprise in his voice. "I almost didn't," she admitted. Following him inside, the circular main floor had been transformed into a recording space unlike any she'd seen in documentaries or magazines. Vintage equipment sat alongside cutting-edge technology. A magnificent grand piano occupied the center of the room, bathed in natural light from windows facing the ocean. "This is not what I expected," Cassandra said, drawn immediately to the piano. "Most people say that." Julian gestured toward the instrument. "Steinway Model B, best acoustic properties for solo piano recording. Would you like to try it?" Her fingers hovered over the keys. "I don't know if I'm ready. No audience here except me and the seagulls," he said, moving toward a control panel. "And I've already heard you make mistakes, so that pressure's gone." Something about his matter-of-fact tone loosened the knot in her chest. She sat at the bench, adjusted her posture, and began to play Autumn Whispers again. This time, when she reached the difficult bridge, she paused briefly, took a breath, and pushed through. The notes that followed, the part Julian had mentioned, the best part, flowed like water from her fingers. When she finished, silence hung in the air. Julian hadn't moved from his position by the controls, but his eyes had closed. "Was that okay?" she asked hesitantly. His eyes opened. "That wasn't just okay, Ms. Winters. That was what I've been waiting to hear for 3 years." Over the next 4 hours, they worked through her composition, Julian offering subtle suggestions about tempo and dynamics. He never took over, never imposed his vision, only helped her clarify her own. "You've been hiding this talent for how long?" he asked during a break, pouring her herbal tea from a battered kettle. "I've played since childhood, but composing—" She accepted the mug gratefully. "My grandmother encouraged it, but after she died, it became something private. The bookstore keeps me busy enough. Bookstore owner by day, secret composer by night?" She smiled despite herself. "Something like that." "What about you?" Everyone knows Julian Porter disappeared without explanation at the height of his career. His expression shuddered. "Sometimes visibility becomes a prison." "Is that why you live in a lighthouse?" The irony? A surprised laugh escaped him, short but genuine. "I hadn't considered that." He studied her for a moment. "Most people are too intimidated to ask direct questions. Most people didn't humiliate themselves playing piano in front of you before properly introducing themselves," she countered. "We're past conventional etiquette, I think." Something shifted in his expression, a softening around the eyes, a slight relaxation of his perpetually tense shoulders. "Fair point, Cassandra." He guided her back to the piano, avoiding further personal discussion. By sunset, they'd recorded 3 versions of her composition. When Julian played them back through the studio's sound system, Cassandra barely recognized her own work, not because he'd changed it, but because he'd captured exactly what she heard in her head but had never been able to reproduce. "There are 6 more where that came from," she admitted as they listened. "If you're interested." Julian turned to her, backlit by the fading sunlight streaming through the windows. For a moment he looked younger, unburdened. "I'd like to produce an EP with you. 6 tracks. Professional release, though under a pseudonym if you prefer anonymity." "You can't be serious." "I've never been more serious about a project." He hesitated. There would be no public performances required. Just you, this studio, and these compositions. Cassandra thought of her quiet bookstore, her predictable life, the notebooks filled with music no one had ever heard. "Why me? Why now?" Julian turned back to the control panel, adjusting settings as he spoke. "Because before I heard you play, I hadn't wanted to produce music in 3 years. He paused, then added quietly, "You reminded me why I started doing this in the first place." As Cassandra drove home that evening, the setting sun painted the sky in hues that matched the emotions swirling through her: golden possibility, purple apprehension, and the deep blue of unexpected connection. 6 more compositions, a professional recording, and a reclusive producer who had somehow seen what no one else had bothered to look for.